What's poppin', people? My name is Jonah from Baskel, and in this video I'm going to give you an overview of our new plugin Diffusae 2, which allows you to use the powerful text-to-image AI model Stable Diffusion right inside of After Effects on both Mac and Windows. But what's new in this version are some new models that are up to 4 times faster than in the previous version, the ability to download custom models from Civet AI. It features a new Temporal Consistency model that creates very smooth animations from frame to frame. It features a much easier to use and intuitive UI. And as always, it allows you to keyframe prompts and use models such as Illusion Diffusion and ControlNet to create some really cool things that I'm going to show off in this video. Also, we're planning on adding support for the Flux family of models in an upcoming update. You can check the product page for updates on that. All right, to start, I'm just going to show you how to download models real quick. So there's a button here called Models Manager. If you click on that, the Models Manager opens up in a new window. And here is where you can have the option to download all the models available to you. I'm going to go over what most of these do in this tutorial, but for the ones you don't have installed, you're just going to hit the Install button here, and that'll install it. And I'll go over some of the other features here later on in the tutorial. All right, to start, I have this cool footage I took of a rock under a microscope, and I've just put it in a pre-comp and edited it so it loops repeatedly. And I'm just going to add Diffusae 2. And you'll see, unlike in the first version, as soon as you add it, it immediately does something. So if we just play through this, so here it is rendered out. By default, it's using the Fast Stable Diffusion 2 model, also known as SD Turbo. And it picks a random prompt for us to start, but let's pick something else, maybe mountain range, Swiss Alps. And you can see the cool thing about the Fast Stable Diffusion 2 model, SD Turbo, is that it's very fast, as is in the name. So I only have an RTX 3070, which is not a very good graphics card, and yet it's rendering each frame here in about half a second, which is a lot faster than... We still have the old models here, so I can show you to compare if we go to Stable Diffusion 2.1. By the way, whenever you change the model, the first frame you do will be really slow because it's loading the model. But then once it's loaded, I'll show you what the second frame. So it's similar results to Stable Diffusion 2.1. In this case, actually, 2.1 is not looking very good. But if we tweak the settings, I'm sure I could get it looking similar. But you can see Stable Diffusion 2.1 is taking 2.5 seconds, while SD Turbo was taking about half a second. So it's like 4 to 5 times faster here. For comparable results, in this case, even better looking results. So I'm just going to render this out and see how it looks. So already, I think that's a pretty cool clip. Okay, so next I want to show you the Temporal Consistency model that we added in Diffusae 2. This model is pretty awesome, and it solves probably the biggest problem with Diffusae 1, which is the flickering from frame to frame. So I have this clip. So if we add Diffusae 2, and then maybe I'm going to add an interesting prompt. In this case, because the effect strength is pretty low, it's not going to be paying super close attention to the prompt. So, I could even just get creative and add something like a beautiful nature scene. And just to be interesting, we can also go close up of a man, just sort of see what happens. And now I'm going to select the model, and we might rename this to just Temporal Consistency or something. It might not be exactly that name when you look on the list. And now we can see if we go frame to frame after the model's loaded, there's a lot more consistency compared to the other models, and I can do a direct comparison in a second here, but I'm just going to render this out so you can get an idea. So you can see here, it looks pretty stable from frame to frame. It's pretty well the same face. The background isn't changing too much. So this is an incredibly powerful model. There's a lot of really cool stuff that you can do with this. I'll show you another example, and with this other example, I want to illustrate an important point. Okay, I think this is a pretty cool clip, so maybe we'll just trim it, and then, so you can see this is a clip we have, and maybe I just want this bit. So if we add the Temporal Consistency model here, Diffusae, Temporal Consistency, and maybe something like a lion wearing a hat photo, something like that. What I expect is for it to look pretty bad. Not really that similar to the original clip, not really moving in a way that makes sense. And the reason for that is that the Temporal Consistency model only works, or at least works best, when the first frame looks like the rest of the clip. So in this case, the first frame, actually the first 2 frames here, are a completely different shot. So you're going to want to make sure that the first frame of your clip looks the same as the rest of the frames. To do that, all we have to do is trim it here. Now if we turn it back on, okay, so it looks a lot better here. The problem is After Effects has already cached those frames, and changing where we trimmed the start of the clip didn't delete the cached frames. So I'm just going to go Edit, Purge All Cache, and that will remove those cache frames so it re-renders them. Now it looks a lot better. At least it's in the lines in the right position. I'm going to try lowering the effect strength a little bit, see if we can get looking a little closer to the original clip. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty cool. Render that out. So yeah, that looks pretty cool. What I'm going to try actually is say a lion looking to the right wearing a hat. See if we can get his face aligned with Oppenheimer's face. Yeah, that's a lot better there. And maybe adjust the seed a little bit more. Okay, I found a seed that I liked. I'm just going to render that out. And just for the record, I had to look at like 30 seeds before I found one that I liked. And this one seemed to be the best. So I think that's pretty cool. It looks pretty stable from frame to frame. Successfully turned Oppenheimer into a lion. And just for comparison to Diffusae 1, if we compare that to not using the temporal consistency model, in this case we'll just use the basic fast stable diffusion 1.5, maybe raise the effect strength so it looks pretty similar, and then render that out. You can see without the temporal consistency model, it changes significantly from frame to frame. Some of the frames, if you stop on them, look pretty good, but then within a couple frames it completely changes to a completely different look. While the temporal consistency model ends up looking more or less like the same lion in the same position throughout the whole clip. So that's the power of this model. So now I want to get into one of the most requested features, which is the ability to use custom models. So in this version, you can add most custom checkpoints from civitai.com, although not all will work, a lot will. And what I've done here is I've just looked under models and building models, and then we only support checkpoint models at this time. And you can do any base model from Stable Diffusion 1 all the way to SDXL. Here I'm just going to go with SD 1.5. And then I've looked at the highest rated ones of all time just so we can get some really good ones here. So for example, this architecture model looks pretty cool. Might want to give that one a try. All we have to do is copy the URL and then go into Diffusae, open Models Manager, paste in the URL here, click search. It should pop up and then hit install. Okay, so this model requires login to download. Currently there's a bug where certain models that require login to download won't work. Like if we hit download here on Civitai, it'll ask us to sign in. Even if you do sign in on your browser, it won't work. This is a bug that we are looking to fix, and by the time this video's out, if there's a newer version, you can check the changelog, it might be fixed. But for now, we're just going to pick a different model. For example, this one, I copied the URL and we'll hit install. And now it's started installing. I'm just going to give it a minute. And now that it's finished installing, it's going to tell us to restart After Effects and load the same project. And now you can see here, the model I just downloaded, Architecture Exterior, is available in the model's parameter. I'm going to choose it. Maybe we can look at some of the examples here to see what types of prompts they used. That's a cool prompt. I like this prompt. I'm just going to copy it here from Civitai and then paste it into the prompt box. It's pretty long, but yeah, look at that. I'm getting a similar vibe. Of course, it's using the underlying image here as reference. I could even increase the effect strength so that it looks less like the original image. And yeah. So one last thing that I want to go over is in the Models Manager. Oh, so actually here it's already open, so it's not going to open a second one. It won't show you the installed Civitai models. To view those, you're going to have to, there's a note about it here, you're going to have to open Models Cache, and then that'll open the folder where the models are stored, and then here you can look at the Civitai models. They're all the ones starting with Civitai, and so if you want to delete them, you can delete them here. Or also if you search for them again here, then they'll come up and you can remove them that way. And then one last thing, if you want to change the folder where the models are stored, you can do that by clicking Change Models Cache here, and then it will always open this window to the default folder, which is your user folder, Basco Cache, Diffusae. But if you want, you can change it to something else and then just restart After Effects. And you are going to have to move the models manually right now. So if you already have models installed, you can just cut the folders here and paste them into the new folder, or just delete them and then reinstall them. Oh, and then actually we just changed the designs. So the opencivitai.com button is up here, and all that does is open civitai.com in your browser. So you can easily find models and then paste the URL in here. So that's custom models from Civet AI, one of the cool new features of Diffusae 2. Now I just want to go over some of the features that were also in Diffusae 1, just as a refresher and to show off how cool they are. So here I have our new logo, featuring our slight rebrand to add an A to our name and change the capitalization. And I'm going to use it to show off the Illusion Diffusion model, which I've already installed in the Models Manager. So the cool thing about this model, which we show off in a video here, is it takes the underlying frame and then generates a brand new image that tries to sort of shape objects around the outline in the underlying frame. So it can be used to, for example, if you have a QR code, make an image that scans as a QR code, but just looks like a cool image. Or in this case, we took our old logo and integrated it into a bunch of different scenes, and I'm going to do that now with our new logo. Then maybe go Fortnite, video game, playful, FPS, and see what that produces. Oh wow, looks surprisingly like Fortnite right away. And the text is pretty legible, so maybe I could even reduce the control net strength. Maybe 145, give that a shot. That looks pretty cool as well, a little bit different. I kind of like that actually. I'm going to try adjusting the seed. That's pretty cool as well. These settings seem pretty good and generally produce a good output, so I think I could produce a cool little animation if I just animated the seed. So I'm just going to try that here. I want each seed to be around for a couple seconds, or for about half a second. So I've gone about 5 seconds into the clip, and I'm going to go up this by like 9 or 10, and then put it into the expression math.round the value. The problem is if you don't round it, then internally After Effects will actually, even though the seed is the same for all of these frames, internally it's not, because it's actually storing it as a decimal value. And so it won't use the cached frame for all of these, and it'll take a very long time to render. So if you are going to keyframe the seed and you want one seed to last multiple frames, just make sure you apply the math.round expression here. And I just did that by alt-clicking on the stopwatch and then typing in this expression. So I'm just going to render out all these frames. It's going to spend, yeah, okay, so actually what we should do is math.floor, which rounds down, and then exclude this last frame. So I just made the work area 1 frame shorter, and now it'll spend the right amount of time on each frame. And then also this last one, it's not exactly blending in right, so just skip it there. But yeah, this could be a cool marketing material for social media, or intro to a music video, or used in a video game trailer or something like that. And you can of course combine this with the other features like keyframing different prompts. So you can add as many prompts as you want and then adjust the strengths between them, which I'm going to show you in a minute. But yeah, this Illusion Diffusion model is super powerful. Again, you can use logos, text, QR codes, and you're just going to want to mess around with these 4 sliders to get it looking right. Just to quickly go over it, the control net strength adjusts how much it tries to adhere to the underlying frame, in this case the logo. And control net start defines at which point in the generation process it will start trying to adhere to the underlying frame. Generally for this, I think it looks best at 0, but I can show you here, like say, the overall idea for the image was just based on the prompt and not on the logo at all, and so it kind of had to hack it on at the end. And the control net end is the exact opposite. So if you want sort of the more fine details to look less like the underlying image, you can try lowering that. Again, I generally like to keep it at its default of 100. And then prompt guidance, which is also available on certain other models. Generally, it changes the extent to which the generation adheres to the prompt. A value between like 6 and 8 is generally looking pretty good. Okay, and then the last feature I want to show you is keyframing prompts. So here I have a clip from the Barbie movie, and I'm actually just going to freeze it for the case of this, so it's just a still. And I can do that with time freeze frame, and now it's just that one still. And then I have a adjustment layer here, which I'm going to turn on, and all I've done is just change the hue a little bit so it's green. I'm going to apply Diffusae 2, and we can go with the default SD Turbo, and maybe we'll change it to cool dog. Pretty cool image. You could even increase the effect strength. If you're just trying to generate a creative image, it's useful to still start with something other than just a black frame, because it generally won't look good. You want to start with some type of image. It'll just be any random image that has a lot of detail. In this case, just using this shot, even though it's not looking like the original, that's okay. Because for this, I'm just trying to make a cool video that keyframes between different prompts. So we can try adjusting the seed here. Maybe actually we do want to lower the effect strength just a little bit. That's pretty cool. And then I can add another prompt here. Let's say a cool cat. So now when you add the two prompts, they're each going to be trying to affect the image. So it's something between a dog and a cat in this case. But if we lower the prompt weight for a dog all the way to 0, then it's just using the cat prompt weight. And so we can actually create keyframes of these things. So if we started off with just the dog on 100%, the cat on 0, then maybe in the middle we'll get to the reverse of that, and then at the end we'll get back to the original, and I'm just going to drag that to one frame after the end so that it loops smoothly, and grab all these keyframes, hit F9 to easy ease them, and then we'll render that out. So we can see here we got the animation. It's transitioning from dog to cat and cat to dog. I think that's pretty cool. I also just gonna maybe add this color balance hue adjustment on top on another adjustment layer. Adjusting the hue here just kind of emphasizes the difference between these two images and makes it look that much cooler. So real quickly here, I just want to go over some of the changes to the parameters in Diffusae 2. So what we've really tried to do is retain all the customization ability from Diffusae 1. So anything you could do in Diffusae 1, you can do in Diffusae 2 and more. However, the default values are a lot better. So if you don't want to dig into the weeds and adjust all the advanced parameters, which are in this advanced parameter category here, then you don't have to. They're automatically going to be set to values that should, in most cases, look pretty good. So for example, the scheduler, it's automatically going to pick Euler for most models, which looks really good. And if you're not doing prompt transitions like we are here, DPM multi-step also looks pretty good. So for example, in this shot that we did earlier, we could try DPM multi-step and see how it looks. And, you know, it's different, and arguably it's better, arguably it's worse. It's just a different look. And that's true of all these schedulers. Like, the way that they change the image is pretty subjective. In some cases is hard to tell. Some of these I think will look better if you reduce prompt guidance. We also added an internal render size. It's just going to resize it up or down internally to whatever the internal render size is here. And so each model has an ideal render size, but we figured most users probably would rather have it picked for them, and then with the option to change it if you want. So the auto will automatically pick the best internal render size depending on which model you have selected. And then internal resize methods. So if you notice here, the internal render size is just one number. And so it's kind of ambiguous if we resize a clip, like let's say this clip here is 3840 by 2160. If we resize that to be 512, are we changing the width to 512, which would be 512 by 288, or the height to 512, which would be 910 by 512, which are very different resolutions. That's what internal resize method lets you choose. And the auto, if I remember right, we have set to balanced for all models except for SDXL models, which we have set, I think, to faster. And then lastly, the other setting that we made a lot easier to use is the quality, which is actually internally adjusting the steps. The problem we had before was that different models had different amounts of steps that were ideal. So for example, SD Turbo models, if we switch steps to custom here so we can enter a amount of steps in as a parameter, the turbo models actually look best with almost no steps. Like you can see one step actually looks pretty good. 2 steps looks great with the turbo model, or actually because we have a effect strength set to 70, it's doing the same thing, but 3 steps in this case looks great. But then with other models, like for example, normal stable diffusion 1.5, 3 steps looks really, really bad. And again, going with this general philosophy of giving you full control, but also automating it if you don't want that full control, these 3 options, normal, high, and very high, will vary depending on which model you have selected here, so that it should always be in a good range for that type of model. But if you do want to customize it, you have just as much control as before by hitting custom and then going in and changing it here. So I'm just showing on screen now what the normal, high, and very high are actually choosing for the steps value internally. So let's just go back to the architecture exterior and the default value for steps, which is normal, and try a different seed here maybe. That's a cool looking house. And maybe actually we can increase the resize method a little bit to get some higher resolution. So one other tip is that you should go into composition preview and disable cache frames when idle, which is actually on by default in After Effects. When you have that on, it's going to try to render all the frames in the timeline in the background when you're not using it, which for most effects is fine, but Because Diffusae takes so long to render each one, it uses so much of your computer's resources. It's better to just have that off, otherwise you're going to be constantly rendering in the background, which is pretty stressful for your computer. Also, another tip is you should update your NVIDIA drivers. So if you just search NVIDIA driver on Google, you'll come up with this page. You can either use GeForce Experience or just enter your GPU model in here, and we press start search. It doesn't really matter if you use the Studio driver or the Game Ready driver. And then if you happen to have a computer with multiple GPUs, you can open up NVIDIA Control Panel from your Start menu. And then under CUDA GPUs, you can select whichever one here you want Diffusae to use. Another thing you can do in NVIDIA Control Panel, if you have the latest Studio driver, then there's a feature here called Sysmem Fallback Policy. And so by default, if your GPU's video RAM fills up, which is what Diffusae uses to render, it's going to start using your CPU RAM, which can make Diffusae suddenly slow down. So you might find if Diffusae is suddenly slowing down, first of all, you should probably lower the internal resolution or use a smaller model. But you can also try prefer no sysmem fallback, and then at least when you reach the limit of your video RAM, instead of slowing down, it'll just give you an error. So one last thing I want to say is in some cases, there's a bug where when you're using a model that's too big or using too much video RAM, After Effects will sort of freeze or the comp window won't update. So if that's happening, just restart After Effects and then try to avoid using a model that big. You could lower the internal render size, or again, just use a smaller model like SD 1.5 and 2.1, and the ones based on them are generally very friendly on video RAM. And you can set internal resize method to fast or the render size to even lower, like 512, which for this model is the automatic one, and you shouldn't have that issue. But again, if you have any issues with that or with anything else, or just feedback, feel free to open a support ticket on AE Scripts. I'd love to hear from you and help out if you have any issues. So that's it for Diffusae 2. If you have any questions at all, please open a support ticket on AE Scripts or reach out on our Discord, the link to which is on the product page. Super excited to see what you guys make with this and all the new tools that are available. And with that, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do. Thank you.